Greetings and welcome to The Headhunter with me, Laban Cliff, coming to you from Kofisi, Africa. As always, we try and ask the same question, which is, how do you get yourself on the hunter's list? Now, we bring you thought leaders, we bring you inspiring leaders who will actually tell you and give you insights on how to get to the top. The next lady I'm about to introduce to you really excites me. Why? It's because she's young, she's ambitious, and she's focused. She got to C-suite at a very young age, and this is none other than Kagure Wamunyu. Take a look at her profile. Now, I really want you to talk about your journey, because I think why it's critical to have you on The Headhunter is inspiration you give to the girl child and the young ladies who are out there and not quite sure where they take this step and stuff. So let's pause for a minute. Take us through your journey right from Alliance Girls High School to Zawadi program, to the States and back to Kenya, and the impact you're having to date.
Okay. So during my days in high school, I was quite a typical student. So I went in there and, you know, like every African girl, you're told this is your one chance. You have this opportunity to make it to university. And to me, it was not just that. I saw high school as an opportunity to actually become an all-round student. So I was that kid who was in every club. You know, Red Cross, I sang in the choir, I was in social welfare society. And I saw this as opportunities to really grow in areas just beyond academia. And looking back, that was one of the best decisions I ever made. Because when Zawadi Africa came calling, they had an opportunity for students who were all around. And that was the key emphasis they had, that you were supposed to be book smart, but beyond that, you were to be all-rounder, contributing to the college or university that you were going to go to. So after Alliance, I went through Zawadi Africa, I went to Meredith College, which is an all-women's college in North Carolina. It is here that my leadership skills were really harnessed. It was an opportunity where one learned to speak up, one learned to express themselves well, and really have that element of, this is what I want to do, this is what I need to do to get there.
Being a student in diaspora, is that the way to call it? Like, you know, having traveled and the impact that had on you. When you talk about speaking up, talking about meeting the US Secretary of Transport, you know, how that helped you, you know? If we just speak more into that. Okay.
So there's a saying in my mother tongue, "Utadhiaga oe nyina nowe murugi," which loosely translates to one who doesn't travel thinks their mother is the best cook. Now, when you apply that in today's world, what that means is that the more you try new opportunities, this could be in your town, the more you travel beyond your town, beyond your city, beyond your country, the more you learn. And the more you learn that, hiya, there could be some things I didn't know. There could be a better way to do things. This is how people do things. These are some of the things I could borrow. So when I think about my opportunity in diaspora, just reaching out and, you know, making the application to go study in the US. You know, back in the day, there were no computers. It's not like now. You used to go to a cyber. It's you're spending, you managed to beg your parents to give you 200 bob to go try and look up universities in America to try to be able to get that opportunity. And so when I look back, that pushing myself to go do that gave me this opportunity to try new things, to learn how different people think, how different people do their things. Now, the key for me was always, even when I was there, everything I wrote, whether it was a thesis, anything I studied, I would study it on Kenya. Because there would be things that are not translatable. Our issues or challenges are different. But when you take, whether it's a theory you have learned, you apply it here, you find it, oh, so this is how we could solve a certain problem. This is how we could think about a certain problem. So to me, the anchor of diaspora was that exposure. It was the opportunity to lead. It was the opportunity to learn. So I'm a third-year student. I get an internship because I've gotten this award. And I you know, it is in a world where we were doing North Carolina, the state plans, long-range transport plans. And I remember thinking to myself, people plan 40 years out. My goodness, you know, I was like, oh, so this is something we could do. And I got exposed to the world of urban planning. So I was coming in as a mathematician and also as a civil engineer. And I learned we could actually decide how our cities are built and how our cities look like in Africa, which to me was important because by 2050, half of Africans will live in cities. And so it was quite a critical thing. And through that exposure, I was like, so as opposed to just building roads as a civil engineer, I could do urban planning, which is a sector that takes on the infrastructure but puts on a layer of people. Yeah. So when I finished my undergrad, I applied to do my master's in urban planning. So I got into UC Berkeley. This time, so my undergrad, I had finished it through Zawadi Africa Education Fund with Meredith College, and now I was with MasterCard Foundation. So that they are the ones who sponsored my grad school education. So here, the emphasis was, so the MasterCard's emphasis was study abroad and move back home. And it was really about, I'm taking studies about the city of, you know, my thesis was on the city of Nairobi. How do we look at the master plan? How should the city look like? And so as I was doing that, everything, I would always just focus on Nairobi. Uber came calling. So I had not yet finished my master's, and so I got a ping by a headhunter from Uber, and they said, you know, we're launching in Kenya. We are looking for people who may be interested. And so I remember I interviewed, and then I told them I will join, but I have to finish my master's, so give me at least 2-3 months, and then I'll be able to do that.
Hit pause. Uber had not launched in Kenya, and they were talking to you already while you're in the States to come into the country. How did that make you feel, first of all, as a person, having that call from a headhunter? I'm emphasizing headhunter, but, you know, getting that call, you're doing your master's to get a call to come back home. How did that make you feel, first of all, as a person, and did that have any impact in even your studies as in the master's level?
So it was a non-negotiable that I had to finish my master's, for sure. But it excited me, I must say, because at that point, when you're in your last semester of school, you're constantly asking yourself, okay, what will I do? What are the opportunities? Should I stay? Should I move? At that point, Uber was a tiny company in terms of in the Kenya context, but Berkeley is in the, you know, the Bay Area, and so in the tech world, I knew what it was and what it stood for. Now, an important lesson I learned here, you know how I was excited to get my job at Uber? So I call home, I tell my parents, oh, I'm moving back. I'm going to work for a company called Uber. They're like, what is Uber? So I say, oh, it's this thing, you know, you use the computer, the phone.
No, I think if you say taxi hailing to your parents, you lose them. So what are you going to say?
So there was no taxi hailing.
There was no,
there was no taxi hailing. So you just like,
yeah.
So this thing, okay, kuitisha taxi. You know, you're like summarizing it. Yes. And I remember my dad was like, yani nilikusomesha hii miaka yote ufanye kazi ya
taxi.
And then I said, yeah, but now think about it.
Yes.
Here we have is an opportunity to change how people move in Nairobi. And so moved back, and so the first thing, we were working in a co-working space. We were trying to figure out how will the product work. So we've launched, you're working with a credit card model. Now, credit card penetration is quite low in Kenya. Yeah. The product was not going to work that way. So it was a cash product. And what was interesting, so Nairobi and Hyderabad in India were the two cities that were chosen to pilot. And so I remember, you know, people would imagine it's like a fancy pilot. This time you're trying to make a case for cash product because you know this is a product that's going to work in your market. It doesn't necessarily work in other markets. And so you're reconciling through Excel sheets and just trying to make it work so that you can prove a case that, you know what, product team, please build for us a cash product. So we did that, and Nairobi became the first city in the Uber world, over 400 cities in the world, to actually roll out 100% cash. This was an important lesson for me because as you think about tech, as you think about problems, is how do you localize your solution?
But hold on to that. If you speak to MasterCard, you speak to Visa, they're struggling to fight that whole cash is king, 95% transaction cash bit. So how then do you kind of draw a balance where you say, yes, we know, you know, Kenya will still operate cash, but we still want to encourage electronic banking, you know, magstripes or tap and go or something like that, you know, so that, yes, you have starting out, but, you know, you kind of draw a balance and say you encourage people to be cash light for instance?
Okay. So at that point, it was a different time because companies like Uber had what we called you swiped your card that was cross-border. So the payments were being done cross-border. It's a global company. And so at that point, credit cards in Kenya or debit cards would block every time you transacted. So I think as you mentioned, when companies are thinking about this is, what are the use cases for Kenyans when they're using cards? So Kenyans are big shoppers, as online shoppers through Instagram, through Facebook, etc. That's an area of penetration for them. How do they make it easy? So taking a product and thinking about it on how do Kenyans use it. That's how I would approach it. Because our use case, if I use my card, I still have that Kenyan mentality. There's what I pay cash, there's what I use mobile money, and then there's what I use a card for. And so identifying how it is Kenyans pay and what it is that they use for card, and then building on that. That's how I'd really go about it in terms of penetration.
Oh, greatest lesson from Uber and greatest challenge, and what you learned from it?
Okay. So greatest lesson. It ties actually to my next 2 jobs after. So while I was there, there was, it was a new product in the country. People did not understand it, and so there was quite a lot of pushback. There were strikes, etc. So I was young. I'm seeing people marching with my name on a placard, and not really, because you're trying to explain to people what exactly is this product and how does it work. So a lesson for me was, as a company, as an individual, be articulate. Be good at communicating what it is that you do. Do your best where you are. Sometimes we think about where it is we want to go next and not focusing on where we are now. People are watching. When I said I was headhunted to Uber, my next 2 jobs were the same. And it was really people who saw me work. My board opportunities came from that. The jobs. Even now, as I build my company, the team I'm building, my C-suite, are really people who've looked at me and said, hey, we want to work with you, we want to back you, we believe in you because we've seen you work. So the other lesson has been that do your best where you are. So that thing I mentioned earlier, the importance of being all around, it comes in place now. So I would say learning that there's multiple stakeholders in a job. There's your customers, there's your managers, there's your colleagues, there is your team who report to you, and just thinking about how is it that you work well with them, how is it that you deliver. So learning very quickly how the corporate world works was very important, and so I'm usually very grateful about that. It's like jumping from school straight into the frying pan, and it's taught me a lot. It taught me a lot.
Stay with me, Kagure, because I think we're just getting started. There are lots of highlights you mentioned, as I said, quickly writing notes, but I'd like to also engage you further on your greatest achievement as well. From now, because I felt like your career is also spanning into more of a transport logistics, but you've also now gone into something different. Yeah. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Headhunter with me, Laban Cliff, coming to you from Kofisi, Africa. Again, as I said, there's a lot of conversation about how do we encourage the girl child to actually step out of the cocoons, I must say, for those who are in cocoons, and also just trying to encourage them to just take on leadership positions, be out there. This is coming hot on the heels of the International Women's Day, where the conversation about break the bias and really encouraging women to just get to the forefront comes across. Before I get to that, and how do we encourage young girls, because they're really inspired by your story.
I was really thinking about, one has to, by the time you're working in a startup, you have to be able to see the vision of it. And that's the thing. You've got to back something, believe in something before you put in your hours and energy to get there. And that was the case. And to me, I was very clear what it is that I wanted to achieve with this. I had seen what Uber was like in the US, and so I knew that there was opportunity for it here in Kenya. And that's how I saw it.
Why it's critical, and that bit about the Kenya startup community is growing, and we're seeing a lot of startups. But the question is, who do you cash in on? Because what are the next Ubers, for instance, if that's a question? Because I mean, you find that maybe there are too many of them, and some of them look to be very ambitious as well. Some maybe don't look to have the market concept right, for instance. I think what's your advice, especially on one bit, to investors and to the startup entrepreneurs as well?
Okay. So if I look at my journey, so after that I worked for, Bridge, and I also then worked for Kobo 360. And for Kobo it was interesting because it was the same thing, launching, but this time I launched in multiple countries in Africa. It was much smaller, and really building it and growing. The idea, and what's important is, does the idea make sense? Is it a problem that needs to be solved? So that's always the first thing. Is it, something your customers are easily accepting? So when, I said that people are always watching, my move to to Kobo was really my colleague who was in Uber in Nigeria, who's founded Kobo 360. And so one day he came visiting, and I thought he wanted me to introduce him to a few people in the country. And he goes like, "Hey, Kagure, why are you confused? I'm here because I want you to join and head my launch of the business." And so
goes back to what you said.
Yes.
Be fruitful at where you are right now, and that's what will impact into your next, because I think you got the Kobo role because a colleague saw you work and saw your output, and they believe.
We used to compete, and Nairobi was a smaller city than Lagos, but Nairobi did better in Uber than Lagos. So he was always like, okay, and so he came, and that's how I joined Kobo. So I was responsible for that launch, setting up. And again, it goes back to willingness to start with a company when it is small. When you're launching, you even start without offices. I was running around trying to get the offices. I remember my first meeting, I always say I was the cleaner. I had a big meeting, and I had just gotten a small office in industrial area. So I was a cleaner, I was the office admin, I was the ops manager, and I was the one who went to the factory to load cargo. So that willingness to really go the extra mile, and that's the mindset of a startup. And so started out there. So that's one of the things that I would say, the vision, and then understanding that it is a product that will make sense, and it is a product that people need in that sector. That's the vision I've always had. So we started out that way. I worked in Kenya, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso, Uganda, etc., in terms of building teams, building product, and running operations for the business.
What did that teach you? Of course, Kobo was more Kenya-centric. Yeah. Now, in terms of Africa startup community.
Well, okay, the obvious cliche that every market is different. But where it becomes important is how you hire your team. So teams are very important. Every country has a different culture, how people view work, and so managing people is different for each of the countries. The other is, when I was told to launch Ghana, I had not been to Ghana. The most I knew was from 844, the obvious, whether it is the dams or Kwame Nkrumah, and I was like, what am I going to do?
Ground out.
I remember I landed there, I was like, okay, it's hot. Sasa, let's see. So that whole just willingness to jump in and trying to make it work. And the first obvious thing was building a critical team, showing them what it is that you need them to do, and then executing. So I did that, and I thought it was the end of the challenge until I was working in Francophone Africa, and I don't speak French.
Oh, wow.
and walking around with Google Translate to really just survive in the streets, to communicate with people. So you learn that, one, it is okay to dive in. You learn that sometimes things are harder, are easier than you think. Then on the flip, sometimes someone can look like they're easily navigating, kumbe they're really kicking to make things work. So one of the key lessons for me has been that, dive in. Different markets are different. Focus, almost have a strategy on how you approach the different markets, so how you launch. The team, who are your core team members. And really when I've hired, and one of the things I've always said is, there's almost a formula to it. I hire hunger. And by hunger, I mean that I want to learn, I want to grow. So if somebody has that, I hire people who have a nature we call humility. And so it's not humility as we know it, but it's because the startup world, as I said, my first job was loading. Yeah. Yeah, I'm out in the factory and I cleaned
master's holder from the States, you've come in, you've been a country lead, and now
so you're in
the factory or warehouse, you call it, just loading cargo.
Yeah. And I was the office, because I'm by myself, I cleaned the office and then I ran quickly and I say, okay, they're coming to meet the head for exactly. But I was the one who cleaned it. So that need is very important for a startup. So the hunger to learn, the willingness to learn, that humility that you can try different things because it's a startup. Things change quite quickly. And then somebody who can communicate and can do some form of data. I think those are the 4 things. And you find when somebody has those 4, you really can move them to different teams. They can actually grow. And one of the most rewarding things for me has been someone entering as an intern, and now they are the regional head for East Africa for you. You know.
Speak to that Form 1, Form 2, who's still not sure, okay, should I go for prefect? Should I go for basketball? You know, I don't know, because I feel that what we are having now is a result of that journey you've had. So what inspiring messages can you give?
Speaking to the young girl at Alliance, or the young girl in high school, I think it is to know that it can be done. I think, you know, one of the things I learned very early, it's very hard to dream of things you've never seen. And I learned that one time I was in Laikipia doing volunteer work, and they told me, we didn't know women go to university. And I said, you know, I was taken aback, and I said, but we've never met a woman who's been to university. And so you learn quickly that you can only dream of things you imagine are possible. So the first thing is that it is possible. It is possible. And if you do your best, learn to build a reputation in terms of you are a person of your word. And where you land, I've seen this change that happens. You know, you're in high school, you thought you could be called to course X, you end up in course Y. If you learn in course Y, which wasn't your first choice, do your best while still there, because there's always opportunities whenever you do your best wherever you are. And try to learn how to do data if you're a college student. Try to learn how to communicate, how you articulate yourself. It will be very critical. If you're looking for your first time job, be willing to start in different areas, be willing to have that core skill set. And then when you get your opportunity, give your best. I always joke, my hours, I used to be the first in the office and the last one out, to really learn, to also be able to deliver on the things that I said I will. And that, if you have extra time, try to improve yourself. So for me, when I look at the past few years, construction has been what I've done as my side thing. And now when I look at it, so, doing real estate development, now I've been able to match my world in technology with that world in construction, and to now launch my startup, Jumba, which is essentially a B2B platform, a tech platform that is simplifying the purchase and financing of construction materials. And the idea is the same way I've used technology to change transport, which is in mobility in Uber, and then in logistics, like in Kobo, is the same thing that I would like to bring in the construction world. And really, how is it that we can make sense of a sector that contributes over 5% of our GDP? How is it that we can introduce efficiencies? And how is it that we can support the small businesses to be able to have that working capital to deliver, to be able to stock their orders? And that's what I'm building, and I'm quite excited about that.
Why this is such a great conversation is what I was even penning down, is that it needs to go down the annals of history, and particularly on the MBA course, or for instance, a case study, for instance, just trying to get the journey. Why I feel is that because you've been at the forefront into trying to, have that opportunity and have that chance to kind of start from zero, and looking at the organizations you've touched, turn to gold. So congratulations, wishing you nothing but the best. I hope the girl child has been inspired by one Kagure Wamunyu, and as I said, we're just getting started, and we'll definitely have our own on the Headhunter for more insights and leadership lessons and opportunities to converse about what's happening up our sleeves and how that can also be inspiring to you. That has been the Headhunter with me, Laban Cliff, and to many more. Please make sure you actually subscribe, get a hold of our portal and our Headhunter platform, where you can actually get more leadership insights from the guests we have here, and many more to come. Thank you and goodbye till same time next week.